even though it's breaking. When there are
Alrighty, welcome back to another Solomon's Porch podcast one-shot review. This time we are going to be reviewing the new movie that just hit theaters yesterday, a couple of days ago, depending on when this gets out there, Joker. We appreciate you checking this out, but do be warned, there will be spoilers in this review. If you have not seen the film, make sure you just be aware. Don't blame us if we ruin the movie for you. But so this film, just a real quick synopsis, it is following a character named Arthur Fleck.
Yes.
Who is going to eventually become the Joker. That's the whole idea of the film. And but the movie has a lot of things that are interesting in it that, you know, we're going to talk about. But in general, real quick, what were your immediate reaction to the film after you watched it?
Well, you know, even just from the trailers, we could see that this was loosely going to kind of be based on the Killing Joke, or at least that sort of origin story of the Joker. And, you know, what was nice is that it didn't stick to that storyline totally,
right.
But it gave that kind of feel. I think that it was a little too long.
Yeah,
It was kind of slow.
So the whole entire runtime is 2 hours, 2 minutes. So Rotten Tomatoes gave it 70%. IMDb 9.1 out of 10. 94% of Google users like it. Those are some of the stats on it. They spent about what did it say that I saw? $55 million on it. There's like pretty much no special effects in it, so it doesn't cost a lot to shoot this type of film.
Yeah, I think probably just finding stuff from the 70s was the hardest part, and probably blocking off streets.
Yeah, the sets were pretty cool. I thought the set-wise, it looked really well done. But yeah, there were several areas like the stairwell that they had and a couple of the streets. Not anything too crazy, but they were able to get it done. Joaquin Phoenix, I think his acting really stood out. What do you think about his performance?
Again, you have to kind of understand the basis of the Killing Joke, and I think that with that in mind, then you can accept Joaquin Phoenix as the Joker. Everybody always wants to compare to the greatest of all Jokers, and this Joker really isn't supposed to be like that anyway. No. So, and that's okay. So I think that Joaquin Phoenix did a phenomenal job of that. The origin story from The Killing Joke, if there was somebody that I wanted to cast for that, I think that Joaquin was definitely a great choice for that. I'm hoping he lost weight for this role because I don't know that I've seen so many bones in a person's body ever before, especially in their rib cage, than I did with him. But
he said on one of the talk shows that he did that he lost 15 pounds.
Was that all?
15, not 15. He could have been joking. That was one of the things. One of the things I said was he's a really awkward interviewer. But after watching the film, it was like, okay, maybe he's doing it on purpose now, because in the film, his interview with the character from Robert De Niro, which was Murray Franklin.
Yeah.
His character was supposed to be interviewing him or whatever, but it was
awkward,
horrific. It was awkward. And so, I think he played that into his interviewing for the film, but I haven't seen a lot of his other interviews, so I don't know if he really is awkward or not. But so just a couple of thoughts that I just kind of wanted to share. Well, real quick, there is some things that I heard other people say. They're saying it's kind of a ripoff of Taxi Driver. I've never seen that movie.
Okay.
But they said it's almost a Taxi Driver film if it were comic book based. So I don't know. I would just say take it for what it is because I have no idea.
I could see that, and not just because we have Robert De Niro in the film as well.
Well, they also say King of Comedy is another movie that they kind of pulled from for this.
Yeah, I don't know about that, but yeah, I could see the Taxi Driver kind of element to it, except that I don't know. It still feels kind of unique into its own.
So it's weird. I don't know if this is the same Bradley Cooper that plays Groot or not, but they have him down as a producer of it. But it was produced by Todd Phillips. They also had Zazie Beetz, which kind of threw me off. Domino from Deadpool 2.
Yeah.
So she was like a she was a desired love interest that he made up in his mind. And so let's kind of dive into that real quick, because I think one of the biggest things, there's two real big things from this film that we kind of need to talk about as quick as possible. Is one is what was actually real and what was not actually real. Because I've heard some people say the last part of the film after the car crash, that everything that followed that probably wasn't real. That he was in the car crash whenever the ambulance hit the police car he was in, and then got sent straight from there to the hospital. That maybe he was making the rest of it up in his mind. So when he took the blood from his mouth and rubbed his face to make the smile, which was interesting. I think that was interesting, him doing that. Mm-hmm. But everybody cheering him on, this, that, and the other. You know, some people believe that was just in his mind.
I'm going to go even further and say the entire thing was in his mind. And I mean legitimately, because he may have never been released from the mental hospital, which it starts off with that there's a reference to him being in the mental hospital.
Exactly.
And then at the end, he's still in the mental hospital.
Exactly. That was a point I was going to make.
Okay,
I haven't heard anybody see it yet. But no, I'm glad you brought it up, because there is a quick snippet whenever he's initially talking to the therapist or whoever at the social services, and it shows him banging his head in Arkham Asylum just as he is like dressed up at the end of the film.
Yeah.
So I said the same thing in the comments on YouTube. I was like, I wonder if he just made all of that up.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
You know,
I think it's entirely conceivable.
And I hate films like that, but you don't really get any clarity in these things. And the other thing too is, did Thomas Wayne really say all that stuff? Because he's supposed to be the antagonist of the film. He's the quote unquote bad guy.
And again, I think that it's because of Joker's slant on him, because this is all in his mind. It's his perception of how he sees everybody. And so no matter how great Thomas Wayne might have legitimately been, he has demonized him in his own psyche. And so that's why it plays out like that. I think that's one of the great things about this film is that you don't know.
Right.
and so we get to argue about this stuff, all day, and everybody's going to have an opinion about it. And frankly, that's the fun of it. I think that was probably the biggest downside. I said that it was a little drawn out. You're talking about a film that, frankly, they probably could have done inside of an hour and a half, or less.
90 minutes felt more appropriate.
Yeah, and not that I want it that short, but for the story that they had to tell, they could have done it in that. And so it sort of felt like they said, hey, you know what? We need to pull another 30 minutes out of our bums, so let's just drag this out a little bit. It just felt repetitious that way.
Yeah. So. Well, I mean, I think the idea is that we're trying to drag it out as much as possible to show Arthur Fleck going from, like, somewhat a reasonable person who has some mental issues to everybody ignoring his mental issues, this, that, and the other. And I think one of the themes of this movie is like, what is society's role on mental health with individuals?
Yeah.
And because obviously, I think it was good they didn't turn this into like a very, very like politically agenda. I didn't feel
there's a
that.
little bit in there.
There's a little bit, but I mean, obviously, Thomas Wayne, that kind of ordeal. But if they were going that route heavily, they did it in a way that was interesting because it's coming from a person with mental health. Because the whole entire movie's from his perspective, like the whole thing.
Yeah,
and so you can't really trust anything that you saw.
So, we're coming off of Mental Health Awareness Month, and, so I kind of would have liked to have seen them play that up a little bit more, because I think that there's a certain amount of awareness that does need to be had in regards to mental health awareness. Here in the United States, we went through a deinstitutionalization where we used to have a lot of state-run mental hospitals.
Right.
Now, for whatever was good about them, there was a whole lot of bad. And especially, given that you and I both have deaf backgrounds, a lot of deaf were institutionalized just because they couldn't speak, so they just figured that they were nuts or crazy, or that they used their hands and gestures, and so that had to be demonic or something. So for all that was definitely bad about institutionalization, they also had some good stuff in that there was a lot more emphasis placed on society's mental health. So since the decline of that, we've had a significant increase in homelessness and people that are untreated for their mental health.
Right.
And I think that this is a great platform for that and trying to bring more awareness. And then we could probably even say, hey, looking at some of the other issues that we've had, the mass shootings that we have had, Joker may be entertainment for those of us that, have our noggins on straight, or at least mostly straight. But those that do battle with these issues that they had no choice over, this is legit for them. So
yeah, and I think there's a lot of people out there who say, well, this film could speak to them and make them want to do stuff. I'm like, there's a lot of things that can make people want to do stuff. So I don't know if you can give this film that much credit.
No, I wouldn't.
So, but I will say that I did appreciate, because one of the things I was worried about was how this is supposed to be the Joker's origin story, but it wasn't, because his name isn't Arthur Fleck. We don't know what his name is because he was abandoned as a child and his mother adopted him, or at least as far as the story goes.
And in this movie,
it still leaves him in a position where he still doesn't know who he is. We don't know who he is. We really don't know where he comes from. And I think that's the most important element you have to keep about the Joker, is the mysteriousness of who he really is and where he comes from.
Well, but now the 1980s Batman Joker, we have Jack Napier.
Yeah, but who cares? I'm talking about the comics original. That was one of the
just saying.
That was one of the beautiful things about the Heath Ledger version, is he kept giving you a different background.
Right. Yeah,
and that's the thing that I like about this.
His origin is multiple choice.
So this gives you more origin than the Heath Ledger did, but it still wasn't a definitive, because we just don't know. His mom was crazy, so everything that he knew and heard growing up, he probably has no idea.
Right.
And the only background we get is what's on a sheet of paper from a mental institution. We don't really get any.
And that's only assuming that was legit, because if the
Exactly.
whole storyline is all in his head, then who knows?
Okay, another important aspect we got to hit before we end this is his laugh. Did you like his laugh?
Loved his laugh.
Either one of them.
Yeah.
Because there were two of them. You had his laugh,
Yeah.
which was the uncontrollable laugh,
Right.
Which I liked that.
Yeah.
I liked the fact that existed. I hated the fake laugh.
Really? No. See,
I didn't like the fake laugh.
I felt like it was.
I didn't like it.
I think that it gave us that transition between the two sides of who he is. So.
Gotcha. So I'm trying to think, any more really important things you think need to be pointed out for this film, other than it being kind of long to do what it is? I know Joaquin is probably going to get a lot of nominations for this film. His acting, the different things that you see him do and portray. I will say the action, or the little bit of, the killing that took place, it wasn't too crazy. Like, if you could watch Punisher, if you could watch Daredevil,
wow.
like, they really
this is like toned down.
very toned down.
Yeah, well, and that would be the only thing that I'd have to say. So if you haven't watched the film and you're gonna watch it, but you're still listening to us beforehand, sorry. I don't expect to get tons of action. This is not your superhero action film.
No.
This is a dramatization of an origin story. And though there is a little bit of action, it is just a little bit.
Yeah.
And I don't know what it was. I was expecting and knew that he was going to end up killing the Murray guy, but still, when he did it, it was I actually spoke out. I was like, "Whoa!"
Yeah, I heard you.
Never do that. I never do that. But for some reason, it was still just like, "Oh, dang!" I guess maybe because it's Robert De Niro, and he splattered his head all over the back of some wall. So
I would say it was interesting that they did show the Bruce Wayne Batman creation. They still held true to that. It was a little different, but
and the pearls and all that.
he ripped them,
stuff.
but you don't want them to be identical to the other ones. So I understand why they did that.
Yeah,
and it's also interesting to see that according to this story's perspective, Joker created his villain and Thomas Wayne created his villain.
Yeah,
and so they created each other's villain in this film. We don't know if there's going to be a part 2. There's